In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to assemble and seam together the Ice Cream Party Cardi. So I've got my pieces here. We're going to start at the top shoulder seam. I've got my left and right front panels right side up laying on top of the back panel, which is wrong side up. I'm going to start by seaming the left front panel here, and we're just going to be seaming along that shoulder seam, starting where the back neck meets the front panel, along that curve, and you're going to stop when it gets to the point where the fabric becomes straight. That straight edge is going to be saved for the sleeve later. Now, depending on what size you're making, your piece may be taller or wider. I'm making the size 2, so my piece isn't very tall or wide. So I've got some yarn here, and I threaded it through my tapestry needle, and we're going to start seaming at the bottom. So go ahead and line up your pieces along the curve, making sure they match up in the right spots. And you're going to be looking for where the curve starts, right there. So go ahead and insert your needle from the outside of the back panel through to the inside. And all the way through the front panel, we're going to be looking for that same spot to match it up evenly. So at this point with our needle all the way through, you can just check to see how well you've done matching it up if you didn't pin your piece like I didn't. Just make sure the heights are the same. You don't want one piece longer than the other. You want them to be the same height with your needle running through it like this. So if you're happy with your height, go ahead and pull that needle all the way through the fabric and leave a long enough tail that you can weave it in when you're all done. And then we're going to go back through that same spot that our tail's coming out of. You're going to go down into that spot and come back up the fabric on the same side. So the mattress stitch is kind of weaving the two pieces of fabric together by going up the side of each of them. You want to make sure when you go over to your next piece, you're coming directly across. So we're coming directly across into the left front panel and up. And you want to make sure you don't go up too high because that determines how far apart your stitches are. So when you pull that thread tightly, you can see it pulls fabric to the inside. It's kind of hard to see with the loose tail, but if you pull on both ends tightly, you can see that fabric being pulled to the inside to create the seam. So we're going to see where our tail is and come directly across to the back piece and come up. And I like to go one stitch into my fabric. That's going to pull that stitch to the inside of the seam. The pattern was written with a 1/4 inch seam allowance so that it accounts for one stitch being pulled to the inside on this seam. So you're going to continue mattress stitching by coming across and going up. Coming across and going up. Once you've finished seaming up the shoulder shaping, you can weave in the end of your sewing yarn. And I like to do that on the inside, kind of weaving back and forth through that extra fabric that was sent to the inside seam. This kind of helps solidify and reinforce the seam that we've already got going. Once you've woven in those ends, go ahead and repeat the process for the other side for the right front panel, and then we will move on to the sleeves. Once you've got both shoulders seamed up, it's time to seam the sleeves into place. So you're going to need to open up your cardigan to do that. And it is going to look a little funky because that shoulder shaping is 3-dimensional. That accounts for that natural slope in your shoulder that's about 1 to 2 inches tall depending on the size. So go ahead and let that stick straight up. And you're going to end up with what looks like a half rectangle that's open there for the sleeve cutout, which is going to fit the top of our sleeve perfectly. So go ahead and open that up, slide the sleeve in, and now is a time that I highly suggest you pin your pieces in place. You can either do this with sewing pins or with locking stitch markers. I like to use locking stitch markers, so that's what I'm going to be using for this tutorial. So start in the middle of the sleeve and pin that to your shoulder seam. It's really going to help line things up. And then you're going to want to secure the corners of the sleeve. So pin the upper outermost corner of the sleeve to that corner cutout. And you're going to want to do that on both sides. And so we're going to start seaming from the corner here. And if you find that's too much of a gap, you can pin that area too. But we're going to start seaming from the corner here, up into the armhole cutout, across the top of the sleeve, and then back down. So go ahead and get some thread and thread your tapestry needle. And we're ready to start seaming. So I'm going to come up from the underneath here on the right side. This is on the back panel. And leave a tail that you can weave in later. And then from the top down into the sleeve on the left, this is just our securing stitch to help keep that tail in place as we start mattress stitching. So come back up through where our tail is coming out of. And we've got our yarn nice and attached, and we can start mattress stitching. So you'll just make sure wherever your yarn's coming from, you come directly over. You come directly over and then up. And then directly over and up. Just like we did on the shoulder seams. And then when we get to the corner here and we turn, looking at where the tail's coming out, I'm actually not going to come directly into the sleeve because that would pull the sleeve in towards the yarn there, and I don't actually want it to go that deep into the corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to carry that thread up. I want that sleeve to come directly across instead of down, so I'm going to carry my thread up just by moving it up again on the same piece one more time. Now my thread is coming out of a place that matches up nicely to come directly over to the sleeve. So now that's what I'm going to do, come directly over to the sleeve and go up. And you can see that pulls the sleeve in nice and tightly into that corner. And then I'm just going to continue mattress stitching the sleeve like we have been. Once you've got your sleeve sewn into place, this is what it should look like. And you can fold your cardigan back in half and see everything's fitting nice and smooth and snug. And all that's left is to seam that final edge along the side of the cardigan and the sleeve. So go ahead and repeat sewing the other sleeve into place on the other side, and then I'll show you how to do that final seam. Now that we've got both of our sleeves sewn into place, it's time for the final seam. The final seam runs along the sides of the front and back panels. You start at the bottom and you work your way up the side and then across the bottom of the sleeves. Because this is a long distance, we're going to want to go ahead and secure that with removable stitch markers or sewing pins. So I like to start by securing it at the bottom, and then I secure it at the wrist, And then I secure it at that armpit area where the seams all kind of meet together at once. And then because the distance is so long between the markers, I'm going to go ahead and place another one, kind of cutting them in half. This is just going to help keep the pieces together as you seam them so that you don't end up seaming them unevenly. So to start, we're going to remove that bottom stitch marker. And we're going to take our needle and insert it from right to left to start just like we did when we did the shoulder seaming. When you pull your yarn through, make sure you leave a tail long enough that you can weave it in at the end. Go back through both of those, go back through the same direction that you did again. And that's really going to secure that tail in place so we can start mattress stitching. So with our working tail coming from the left, we're going to go directly across to the right and up. And then directly across and up. And we're going to continue mattress stitching like we have. It's a little bit easier to mattress stitch this seam because we can line up the rows of the front and back panel. We can see the rows pretty easily. And make sure the rows are lining up, and that's definitely going to help us make sure we're staying on track and seaming the pieces together evenly. As you approach the underarm, I like to flip the piece out and open up the sleeve like that, and you'll see that we're really just sewing a straight line. So continue mattress stitching just right along the edge. When you get to the underarm, remove the stitch marker. And you'll just make sure to keep everything lined up and continue mattress stitching as you have. This is kind of a thick area because you've got a point where 4 seams are meeting. Once you've sewn past your underarm, this is what it should look like. So if you flip it over, if you fold your cardigan in half, you can kind of see we've made it past that part. We've got the nice angle, and on the inside there are 4 seams that are meeting there, so it is kind of thick and bulky. But yeah, you're just going to need to continue mattress stitching down the length of the sleeve, repeat the process on the other side, and that is all the assembly needed. And once you've finished seaming your cardigan, this is what it should look like. And then you'll be ready to start the ribbing, which I've got in a separate video.